Okay, so the engineer has arguably the most complex role at present. They're in charge of the power and cooling systems of the mech. So, they are in charge of the two reactors, Reactor 0, Reactor 1, the radiators, Radiator 0, Radiator 1, and four capacitors, Capacitor 0, 1, 2, and 3. Capacitor 0 is just a general purpose, use it for what you want. Capacitor. Capacitor 1 is the power supply from which the recon role draws their power. Likewise, capacitor 2 is for the pilot, capacitor 3 is for the gunner. So the recon uses his power to scan, the pilot uses her power to move, and the gunner uses power to fire and charge up weapons and such. You can use capacitors any way you like, you can route them anywhere, but they will always be available to those roles for them to draw power from. Grammar. So the engineer has 3 commands, well 4 really, 5 if you can't help, okay. So say, you know what that does, send a message to everyone, reroute, let's have a look at that one, if I type it right. So reroute is used to route power or cooling between components, so you can route power from a reactor or a capacitor to somewhere else, and you can route cooling from a radiator to something else. So as a demo, let's say reroute source type. So here's the syntax for the command. So source type can be radiator, or RAD for radiator, RAC for reactor, or CAP for capacitor. So since reactor 1 is not doing anything right now, let's reroute rack 1 to cap 0, and then you have to supply a ratio. So this determines how the power generated by that component, or generated or stored in that component, is distributed to its power sinks. So in the case of reactor 0, they've all got 100 allocation here, so they all have even. They would also be even if they were all 1, or all 5, or all 1,000. Well, you can't be 1,000, it has to be between 0 and 100. But that's not a percentage, that's the ratio of the split between all of those. So if you're only driving one device from a reactor, then the allocation is irrelevant, it gets all power generated by that reactor, which can be a bad thing because once the capacitor is overcharged they start to overheat, and that's a bad thing. So likewise, let's hook up a radiator here, so let's say rad 1 cap 0 100. So right now radiator 1 is supplying cooling to capacitor 2 and capacitor 0, but because capacitor 2 has 50 allocation, it's actually getting half the cooling of capacitor 0. Now reactors can feed power to capacitors, capacitors can feed power to radiators or other capacitors, or whatever you like. In theory, a capacitor can supply power to a reactor, though I don't know why you would want to do that. So the capacitor 0 is just the engineer's general purpose capacitor. They can use that to power their reactors, or they can use it as like a booster bank to hook up to one of the other capacitors to give them some extra oomph if necessary. So the engineer's role is going to be monitoring how much power everyone's using and whether they need more. Give them more if you can spare it. It's not exactly the case presently, but my aim is to make it riskier to generate higher amounts of power. So it's easy to generate a little bit, but if you start to push it and you run both reactors at once, then it can get a bit dicey generating lots of power, because you'll be, the stakes will be stacking up higher and higher, and that knife edge will be getting more and more tenuous. And it's easy to sort of lose track of what's going on and have a capacitor max out, which generates too much heat for a radiator to handle, and then that radiator can't cool your reactor enough, and then you've got this whole runaway problem that you're going to have to solve in exciting ways with lots of typing. Okay, that's the engineer in a nutshell. Sort of. Hold on, there's one more command. Control. So control, actually there's 2 more commands, goody. Control is used to set the throttle on a component. So reactor 1 here is at 0% power output, so you say control rack 1 5, and then reactor 1 starts generating power. Nothing's cooling it right now, so it's going to overheat pretty quick, so I might turn it back off again. But control is used to set the power level in a reactor and the exhaust rate in a radiator. So radiator 1 here is not doing a great deal. So let's control rad 1 to 50, and its throttle will jump up. So there you go. Very good. And scram is used as to emergency shut down reactor. So it'll just dump a heap of coolant into it, turn its power off, and make it a real pain in the bum to turn back on again, but it's better than exploding. That's about it.